Hey everybody, welcome back. And so now we're talking about our third lesson. I had told you that we are generally using these chapters in the book from the American Management Association. However, and I gave you this to read, and that's good. This is chapter 3, as you can see. Now, actually, as I said, this doesn't exactly match the PPT. This is a lot closer to what we're doing in the PPT next week. For the textbook, to learn more about the subject we're doing this week, which is strategic management, that's where you would use the Dessler book. So chapter 3 in the Dessler book, you'll see, is strategic human management, human resource management, and that's what we want to talk about today. So the reading for this week, and it's not required, but it is highly recommended, is chapter 3 from the Dessler book. And then for next week, it'll be chapter 3 from the American Management Association. That's the Diane, I forget her last name, Anderson maybe? I don't remember. Anyway, okay, so what are we talking about in this section? We're talking about strategy, and in a lot of ways, that means quality. And the reason is when we talk about strategy, we're talking about how HR becomes part of management, this real management area. So we call HRM human resource management, but in this section, we really talk about how HR works hand in hand with executive level CEOs, vice presidents, and the management of the upper level management of a company in order to ensure efficiency, effectiveness, and overall high quality. So we'll start the class with our presentation, and then we'll give the next one, the homework. So let's start with what's the difference between quantitative and qualitative. Again, we'll do that in class, so I think you should look those up, and then we'll do this activity in class. So a bunch of stuff we'll do in class, go through that. What is quality? These are all discussions we can talk about in class. So this is not as long a PPT because there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to discuss in class. But in general, we need to understand what quality means. So quality has a lot to do with this word standard, right? And we saw this in management. We talked about benchmarks and standards of quality. The way we get a standard is we measure one thing against other things of a similar kind. So to get a standard, sorry, let me get a protector for my keyboard. To get a standard of what is a good car, we have to compare it to other cars. To get a standard for what's a good hamburger, we have to compare it to other hamburgers. You can't really get a standard to measure quality without comparing things. In business, quality has this interpretation, and the interpretation is non-inferiority or superiority of something. Another way to look at this is suitability. Is it suitable for its intended purpose, also called fitness for purpose? Does it satisfy customer expectations? All of these are definitions that we have of what it means to say a car is quality, or a hamburger is quality, or this shirt is quality. Is it suitable for its use? If I wash it once, does it fall apart? Does it meet my customer expectations? Is it inferior to other shirts if I compare it? And that's how we get this idea of quality. Okay, we'll do this activity in class. So what is SHRM? So what we're talking about here is the behaviors that a company needs to achieve its strategic goals. We talked in management class about the difference between like a vision statement, a mission statement, goals, strategies, all of those things. And that's still true. And we have this 7-step plan of how we achieve a company's goals that in management we talked about a SWOT diagram and strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats, and how we use that to achieve a company's goals. What we didn't talk about in management is where things like human resources come into play. Our policies, about taking time off, being late, getting sick, discrimination, harassment, all of these different policies we have, and our HR practices like training, onboarding, welcoming people, compensating, evaluating, all of these things that produce the kind of employees we need so that the upper level management of the company can achieve their goals. That's ultimately the point of it. So why is this so important? Well, in some ways that should be pretty obvious. In management, we talk about creating goals and figuring out how are we going to accomplish our goals. But we don't really talk about how do we get the right people. We just leave that to HR. As a manager, we would use a PERT diagram, or we would use a Gantt chart or a load chart or break-even analysis, or any of these analyses that we have, or these methods that we have to establish, okay, what's our goal for this year? What's our goal for this quarter, this month, this week, today? And okay, you do this and you do that and you do this, and I'm going to be a good leader. But this all assumes that I already have a good team of workers, that I could say, okay, you guys go do this and you guys do that, and here on this Gantt chart, I'm going to give you 3 months to accomplish this. And but that all presupposes that I have very good workers here. What we didn't talk about is how do you make sure you get those good workers? Because without them, the whole management thing falls apart. You can't tell people what to do if they're not able to do the job. They're not good. And we talked in management about things like leadership theories, whether it was the Ohio studies or the Iowa studies that said that there are 2 general leadership behaviors, right? Being focused on production and being focused on people. Whether it's considered, people is consideration, it's being focused on the social aspect, and production is initiating structure and making sure you are able to set up the business. And we talked about leadership styles, and then we talked about the contingency theories of leadership, such as Fiedler's theory. If you remember, it looks like a little chart, and the opposite bell curve, which was situational leadership theory from Hersey and Blanchard. And I mean, I'm throwing a lot of management stuff at you, but if you don't remember this, you kind of should take a quick look at Google. What is Hersey and Blanchard's SLT, situational leadership theory, or what was Fiedler's contingency theory? You should kind of have these in your head. When we do HRM, we're doing sort of a second level of management. So with strategic human management, we need to be able to create the plans from management, but then beyond that, we need to be able to make sure the employees can do the plan. Do they have the right behaviors and skills? And then even beyond that, how do we get the people? How do we make sure that we have the people who have the skills to do the plans? In management, we just talked about making the plans. So now we need to go a little bit deeper into this. How do we make sure we have the people who have the skills to accomplish the plans? So we start with something called, well, this is an HR strategy model. We'll talk about this a little in class. I know it's small here, but we start with big. What are our strategic goals, right? And from there, what are the, and I don't know if you can read it, but the employee competencies, right? The skills that are needed to achieve those goals. Do we need the employees to be good at communication? Do we need them to be good at sales? Do we need them to be good at web design? Do we need them to be good at marketing or advertising or engineering or writing? Or, what skills do we need to accomplish our goals? And then we have all of these HR policies and practices that help us develop those skills. And it could be strategic environment. It could be our planning, our recruiting, our selection. It could be our training, our development. It could be our compensation. It could be labor relations. These are all of the elements of HR that allow us to create the skills that we need to create the goals. Okay, so goals are on top. Then what skills do our employees need? And then how do we use HR to make sure we have the people who have the skills to accomplish the goals? So we start with this idea called the hierarchy of goals. So what we're talking about in this lesson really is that we always start at the top with our goal. So what's the goal? Well, let's say that, going back to the example I used before, I have an English teaching school. Okay, and I've hired you guys to work in my school. Some of you guys are teachers. Other people are salespeople. Other people are doing marketing and some are doing advertising. One or two of you are doing web design and internet-based social media communications. Maybe somebody is just doing customer service and contacting the customers to make sure they're happy. We have lots of different jobs. Maybe one or two of you are even managers. The idea of the hierarchy of goals is that from the top of my organization, which is me, I'm the CEO, very down to the bottom, very down, all the way down to the bottom. I'm trying to be too serious, drinking strong coffee, doing too much work. I'm trying to be too serious. Okay, let's keep going. Serious David. So from the top to the bottom, who are the people on the bottom? Now, of course, we might have support staff, people who clean, people who, what else besides clean? Vendors, well, they don't really work for me. I guess cleaning staff would probably be the lowest level. They're not really involved in kind of the goals of the company, although it depends what our goals are. Let's say our goals are customer satisfaction. Well, then having a clean workspace and being very polite and nice and friendly to people would be part of our goals. Let's say our goals are that we want all the students to pass a very high level test. We're training people to take the SATs. In that sense, I don't see how cleaning staff would really be involved, but I would want the bottom level would maybe be salespeople or support staff, trainees, interns. That bottom level, they should be aware of what my goals as a CEO are. That's the idea in a well-run company, that whether it's the CEO, the president, the vice president, the senior manager, the low-level manager, the employees, and then maybe, the teachers, the advertising staff, the marketing staff, everybody should be very clear on what the goals are of this company. And I think in CIP, if you ask most of the teachers, we could probably tell you what are the 5 to 10 year goals of CIP. We should be able to. And in CIP, we probably can. But this is important, and this is called the hierarchy of goals. So if the president says, I want to double sales revenue, this is from a long time ago, 2012, but the president says, I want to double the sales. Well, then what should the vice president say? Okay, let's double the sales in the East, West, and South. Okay, let's add new production lines. Okay, let's train 6 new salespeople, right? All of this is because of and leading to the goal of increasing sales. And then what would a sales manager say for the South region? Okay, we'll get some new salespeople, we'll add new customers. For the East region, maybe we'll deal with the government here a little more. In the West region, we'll move new salespeople to the California market, whatever it is. So everybody should be working towards the same goals. That's the idea. Now, of course, to achieve these goals, we need to be able to set a goal. And we talked about this in management, so we're going to revisit this. It shouldn't be entirely new to you. You understand what a plan is. And that when we make plans, even as individuals, okay, today I'm going to have breakfast at this time, and then I'm going to do this work, and then I'm going to go to this place. And, behind every plan is sort of an unstated or unconscious process where we figure out what resources we have, which could be time, it could be an amount of space, it could be money, it could be labor and people. And this is the same as when managers plan, except in management, we're not just talking about planning for ourselves, we're talking about telling other people what to do and using them. So a basic planning process, let's say we're just planning for what are you going to do this weekend, or how are you going to study for the test, or if you have a lot of work, how are you going to get your work done? So typically, the process involves first setting an objective. What do we need to do for our objectives? Then we need a forecast, and we talked about forecasts a lot in management when we talked about benchmarking. But the idea of a forecast is to have an idea in the future of what's going to happen. So this weekend, I know that I'm going to have to do 4 different assignments to make sure everything's done for Monday. And I forecast that this assignment will take 1 hour, this other thing will take 45 minutes, this other thing will take 2 hours. I'm just forecasting. I also forecast that I'll be tired. I won't want to get up in the morning. I forecast I'll go out with my friends on Saturday night and I'll be tired and I won't want to get up Sunday morning, right? We make our forecasts, our predictions about the future. Then we determine what are our alternatives. Okay, well, I could stay home on Friday and do all my work then and then do it Sunday afternoon. Or I could go out on Friday and then not go out on Saturday until night. Or I could go out on Friday and Saturday, but then not go out Saturday night and Sunday. We figure out all of our possible alternatives. We then evaluate the alternatives, which one looks or sounds better, and then we try it out. And if this weekend we tried to go out on Friday and work on Saturday and Sunday, and maybe that didn't work, and so next weekend we try something else. For strategic management, it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. So let's start with some basic vocabulary. What is strategy? So strategy is just a plan. It's just a course of action to achieve a goal. A strategic plan is trying to use this internal and external, right? Strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. So again, we're talking about SWOT. How we use SWOT in order to maintain or achieve a competitive advantage. All of these are words that should be reviewed. You should remember sort of what were, I'm sure you didn't memorize all of it, but what were Porter's 5 forces? What was the point of that, right? That's about measuring profitability. Would something be a good investment? And the 5 forces that would determine that, things like the strength of the buyers, strength of the suppliers, the rivalry in the industry. Where are the other 2? The threat of substitution and threat of new entrants. So we have all these forces, we have the SWOT diagram, we have this idea of competitive advantage, and we want to achieve our goal, which is to be competitive. So we use strategic management, which is trying to figure out what's our plan and how are we going to, what course of action will we take to achieve our goal. Okay, so we have our strategy, we have our strategic management, we have our process, and we have our vision and our mission, right? So in class, I'm going to have us use this strategic management process rather than just going through the PPT. We're going to actually use this process to analyze a potential business. So I'll ask you in class to choose some sort of business you would consider running or you would consider managing or a job you would like to have or something like that, and then we'll use this process. So we'll talk about the process now in this video, and then in class we're going to choose a product or service that you can imagine selling or being a manager of in China or somewhere else, and we'll talk about how to use this. So here's what the process looks like. And first we'll go through the process, and this is something we did in management also, and then we'll talk about where does HRM fit into this. Now the idea of strategic HRM is as we're making this process, the HR manager is actually there with the president or the senior manager or the CEO. We're working on this together. Why? Because they want to achieve a goal and they need the right people for it. And if I'm the manager of HR and you want me to go out and recruit these people and use tests, which we'll learn about next week, use a bunch of different tests to try to select the right people. You want me to train them. You want me to evaluate them. I have to know what is your goal. If your goal is that you want customer satisfaction and people who are very friendly, you have to tell me that, or else I might take people who are incredibly serious and focused, but not very friendly. If you want people who are incredibly serious and focused, you have to tell me that too. If you want people who are excellent at writing, you want people who are excellent at telephone etiquette, whatever it is you want in your company, if you're not working with HR, you're not going to get the right employees to be able to achieve the goal. So step 1, we're going to define the business, and that really involves our mission statement. We'll go through all of this in a moment. Step 2 is internal and external. That is the SWOT analysis. Step 3 is figure out, okay, so what's our new direction? What did we do before and what are we going to do different now? And then in step 4, we begin this process of going from broad, the mission statement, to narrow. So first we take the mission statement and make that into our big goals, like we want to double our profitability this year. Then we get even more narrow. We figure out, okay, what are our strategies to achieve the goals? Then we implement the strategies and then we evaluate. So we start figuring out what is our business, then the SWOT diagram to understand the internal and external markets. Then we figure out what's our new direction. And then we go broad to narrow from our mission or vision statement to our goals, to our strategy. Then we implement our strategy and then we evaluate it. So step one, defining the business. What does that mean? Well, what kind of products do we sell? What are our services? Who do we sell them to? Where do we sell them? How is this different from other markets that are selling? So if we're running an English teaching school, what do we sell? Well, we sell English lessons. Do we also sell products? Maybe. Maybe we sell tapes or MP3s. Maybe we have a podcast. Maybe we have a website you can subscribe to. Maybe we sell t-shirts with our name on it. We might sell a variety. Maybe we sell book bags. Who do we sell them to? Are we teaching kids, adults? Where do we do this? Is this online or is this in a physical location? And how are we different from other schools? And the way we would do this is by looking at something like the business canvas model, which we presented in management. So you should be familiar with this. And when we discussed it in management, we said we start right here with what do we do? What makes our business valuable? What's our proposition? Lots of people teach English. What makes us valuable? Well, our teachers are all from different countries. They themselves are all second language learners. Great. That's our proposition. Or our teachers are all professional actors at Disney. Okay. Or our teachers teach by using music. Okay. Or we only teach people who are retired. Whatever it is, that's our value. Then we pretty much look at our customers, right? This is the who do we sell to, and where, right? Who and where. Then we're going to look at what do we do? What are our activities? What resources do we have? Do we have any partnerships? And then at the very, very end, we start talking about money. What's our cost? And then finally, at the very, very end, how are we going to make money? Right now, I know when you think about a business, making money comes first. You got to be able to make money. But many businesses don't make money right at the beginning. What's most important is that you have value at the beginning. You can get investments. It might take time for customers to learn about your value. So just trying to make money at the beginning is not always a great idea. Okay, said another way, we start here with this, what do you do? What is your value? Then we move over to, who do you interact with? And your channels, where do you interact with them? Who do you help? Then we move over to, how do you do it? Your activities. And then finally, we go over to the cost and the revenue. So that's step one, is this sort of business canvas model idea of what do you do? And HR, we might not be very involved in that. We might be at the meeting, but it's not our job to tell everybody what we do. That might be the job of senior management. So already I'll tell you, HR is not really involved in step one. Step two is the SWOT diagram, internal versus external. Are we going in the right direction? So in the Dessler book, they talk about some examples such as Yahoo, which was making a search engine that then sort of got overshadowed by Google's search engine, or the Kindle and the iPad, which kind of took over brick and mortar bookstores. We need to know what's happening in our external environment to understand if this is a good idea. In China, are they taking English off of the Gaokao exam? If they are, then maybe English schools aren't the best idea right now. Do people have disposable income? What's the general feeling about learning the language English? So we might use a worksheet. We might scan the environment. What are the economic trends in China? What are the competitive trends? What are the political trends? The technological trends, the social trends, the geographic trends, right? So we would look at all of these external trends. These are all external, and try to figure out in terms of the opportunities and the threats. Are there a lot of opportunities? Like right now with all this Zoom and online education, there's more and more opportunities to teach online, right? But there's also threats to that in terms of people are bored of online education. They want to go back to face-to-face. So we have opportunities and we have threats. So we talked about those. Then we go to the strengths and the weaknesses, the internal aspects, things like, are you a leader in the market? How strong is your R&D team? Do you have high quality products? Do you have any patents? Do you have any advantages? Possible weaknesses, how is your inventory? Do you have a lot of capacity? Do you have a lot of turnover? Do you have a bad market image? How is your management? This is all internal, right? It's all inside of our company to see what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses. And obviously we want to leverage our strengths, right? So we can underplay our weaknesses and capitalize on our strengths. We don't need to avoid strategies just because we're weak, but we do want to focus on areas where we are strong. So where is HR in this? Where's HR? Well, when we talk about the opportunities and threats, right, the external part, where's HR? So the reason that we are in the meeting with the CEO is when the CEO talks about opportunities, they might turn to us and say, okay, David, you're the manager of HR. Tell us a little bit about the market for people who do these jobs. Tell us a little bit about the incentive plans that our competitors are using. Are these opportunities for us? Are other companies giving really good benefits packages? Maybe they're not. And that would be a good opportunity for us to give better benefits. How much money are the other people in the market paying? What about employee data? We in HR are the ones who collect that data. So if they say, well, look, we're considering our opportunities and our threats. One opportunity could be having much more customer service. But how are our employees? Are employees satisfied? Do our employees have any complaints? What do our employees want? In HR, we're the ones who know that. Same with the customers. We know if the customers are satisfied. In HR, we're the ones who are giving those satisfaction surveys. Any information about laws, all of those external things, HR knows about that. And so when the CEO is making these strategy decisions, a really good HR manager is going to be right there with him or her. Internally, the strengths and weaknesses of the company, what do we know in HR? We know the people. So if the CEO says, well, we're thinking of teaching French and Spanish. Hey, David, in HR, do our employees speak French and Spanish? Yeah, we have that information. We have the information about who is good, who is bad, who needs to be trained, who the customers like. So for a CEO to make these decisions without HR is crazy. It happens all the time, though, that you'll have a CEO who says, okay, so we've decided we need to sell some new products and we're going to target the market in Beijing. Now we sell men's clothes in Shanghai. We're going to sell women's clothes in Beijing. And then they go to HR and they say, okay, so we're going to sell women's clothes in Beijing. And HR says, what? We don't have factories in Beijing. We don't have suppliers in Beijing. We don't have our people in Beijing. We've had bad luck with the laws in Beijing. I mean, how do you make these decisions without HR? What kind of people do you want us to get for Beijing? Where do you want us to get those people? When? So for a CEO to make strategies, you really need HR in the room. Then in step 3, we start formulating the new direction. Now again, HR might not be such a big part of this. This is where the CEO and the managers are creating their vision, right? What they want to become. And it's not exactly the same as a mission statement. We won't spend too much time on this because we talked about it a lot in management class. But a vision statement is aspirational. It's where the company wants a community or the world to be, where the company wants to be. A couple of examples like Teach for America. One day in the future, all children in this nation will attain an excellent education. Or the Australia Department of Health, better health and well-being for all Australians, and for future generations. IKEA, our vision is to create this for the future. McDonald's, our vision is to make every customer in every restaurant smile. Well, that's not a good line. To make every customer in every restaurant smile. Nike, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete, right? Oxfam, a world without poverty. So these are vision statements. And as I said, HR might not really be involved in that, right? The difference is that a mission statement is talking about what is our mission day to day. A vision statement is talking about the future someday. What will we do someday? And HR is just making sure we understand what do they want to achieve. Step 4 is turning the mission into strategic goals. So that's going from broad to narrow. So how do they do that? Well, if their mission or vision is to have every customer smile, well, how do you do that? Well, okay, we need to make sure that we have high customer satisfaction, very high. Now HR is involved. We need to make sure, okay, we want to make sure that everybody feels like an athlete. Well, we need to know how the employees feel. Now HR is involved. We want to make sure that we bring education to all children in the world. So, okay, we need really good, devoted, passionate educators. Okay, now HR is involved. HR really enters in step 4 because turning a mission into actual achievable goals requires having the right people. So in step 4, HR is really closely involved in the process. And in step 5, where we figure out courses of action, we can't possibly have a course of action without the right people for the job. So step 6 and 7 is where we're implementing the strategies. And step 6, we're not really involved. I mean, we're involved if we need to hire people or fire people or add or eliminate people, right? But that's it. HR's job is to get the people and train the people. But then in step 7, HR is very, very involved because that's where we evaluate. And anytime you see the word evaluation or evaluate, HR is definitely involved. We are the ones who evaluate the employees, right? That's a whole big part of HR. So again, going back for the overall strategic plan, where is HR most closely involved? And I will expect you to know this for the final exam because I'll give you some sort of story of a company that has problems, and I'll expect you to be able to explain in this strategic HR process, where does HR fit in, what are the problems, and how can HR help? So in this process, what is your business? Not very HR. SWOT analysis, yes. HR is involved both in the external part, understanding our competition, their benefits packages, their compensation, what kind of employees do they have, what's their turnover, and our internal part, what are the strengths and the weaknesses of our employees. Vision statement, we're not so involved, but how do we make strategic goals to achieve the vision? Absolutely, because now it involves getting the right people for the job. Same for number 5, making sure that the people are properly trained in order to achieve these goals. Implementation, not so much, but then evaluation, definitely. So we're talking really about step 2, 4, 5, and 7. That's where HR is really closely involved in this overall strategic plan. Now, there are a couple kinds of strategies that I think we've talked about in management, but I'd like to make sure that we review them. So there's corporate level strategy, competitive strategy, competitive advantage, and then functional strategy. So corporate level strategy first. Corporate level strategy is understanding at a higher level when there are branches to this company. What is each different part of the company, whether it's different departments or different branches? How do they relate to each other? Now, anytime we're talking about communication, we're also talking about HR. And we don't usually have, even in a big company, let's say a company like Sony, the Japanese electronics technology company. In Sony, of course, they have different departments. They have a marketing department, an advertising department, a sales department, and I'm sure it's also geographic. They must have an Asia or East Asia sales, North America sales, Canada sales. They probably have different advertising and marketing departments for different areas. it's not likely that they have different HR departments or people for each department. So advertising probably does not have a separate HR of advertising. Marketing probably does not have a special HR of marketing. Typically, the HR department handles everything. Now, it's possible you would have HR for Asia and HR for North America and HR for Eastern Europe. That might happen. Typically, though, HR tends to be grouped together. And so for corporate level strategy, it's understanding at the highest levels of HR, how are the departments going to communicate with each other? Because anytime there's a breakdown in communication, people are coming to our department in HR to try to fix that problem. So that's corporate level. So we're also talking about things like these things that we've learned back in management, diversification, and things like integration. So with diversification, usually we're talking about differences, diversity. We're talking about selling other products or services. Now, it could be related or unrelated diversification. So for Sony, what's something that's related to what they do? Well, if they sell video games, it might also be a video game chair. It might also be Sony merchandise like clothing or shoes. It might also be batteries. Anything that's related to what the technology that they produce. Unrelated would be something that's totally different, like renting apartments, or doing real estate or selling coffee or, something totally not related to their core business. That's diversification, adding new products or services. Integration is when you're not adding, in fact, you're subtracting. So what you're taking away, it could be forward or backward. For forward integration, what you're removing is the distribution. So maybe in the past, Sony would make their video games and they would put it on another company's platform. They put it in the Google store or they put it in the Apple store. Sony, are not distributing their game. Google is distributing it or Apple is distributing it. Well, maybe Sony wants to cut them out, subtract them, and create their own Sony game store. That would be forward integration. You're getting rid of your distributors. Backward integration is when you're getting rid of your suppliers. So right now, let's say that Sony contracts with other video game companies and firms around the world to get their video game artists and video game voice engineers and sound engineers and all these people to make the game. Maybe instead of doing that, they then hire a big group to work in-house as the Sony video game team. And I'm sure they do have their own video game team. They have enough money that I'm sure they don't just work with different groups around the world. They hired people and they subtracted or cut out all these other suppliers. And now they create their own product. And that would be backwards integration. So diversification is this idea of adding. You're adding new products or services. Integration is this idea of subtracting. You're taking away the distribution or the supply, and you're just doing that yourself. There also could be consolidation. That's another strategy that in HR we need to be ready for. And if there's consolidation, there's a very good chance that we're going to have to deal with firing people, letting people go. There might be an expansion. That's the opposite of consolidation. And then we might be involved in HR in hiring new people. Or there might be a concentration where Sony, for example, decides we are going to focus only on movies. Forget about the video games. Forget about the hardware and equipment and computers. Let's just focus on movies. This focus on one business. And of course, in HR, our job would be to make sure we have the right people for that job. So talking about forward integration, right? That is cutting out the distribution. Backward integration, that is cutting out the supply chain. Related diversification, that is creating either new products or new customers. And unrelated diversification, that is usually a conglomerate, where we would work with another company. So if Sony decides they want to sell coffee also, they're probably going to work with a coffee company like Starbucks, so that Sony and Starbucks could partner together. And that would be to create a conglomerate to diversify. Okay, so generally there are three basic strategies. This was Porter. After Porter talked about his 5 forces, he also talked about 3 general competitive strategies. Cost leadership, and that is where you have the lowest cost, not the lowest price, but the lowest cost. So if Sony has the lowest cost, but their price is still as high as all the other companies, then they're going to make more money. So it's about reducing your cost, not your price. And that could be going to another country and outsourcing your labor, working in Malaysia or Vietnam or some country that might not be as expensive as America. It could be reducing your labor. All of that is going to certainly affect HR. If they want to outsource and they need us to find people or factories in other countries, or they want us to work with people around the world via telecommunication, HR handles all of the employment contracts. So we're the ones who have to understand law and how to write a contract. Other things to reduce cost might just be reducing the workforce. So we might have to get rid of people. It could also be a differentiation strategy where the company is selling something, a product or service that is unique. As I said, maybe our English teaching school, what makes us unique, our value proposition, is that all of our teachers are second language learners who themselves learned English, and that would make us a little bit unique. Focus would be a niche market. Some people say niche. I say niche. A niche market, like a very narrow target market. We're only targeting retired Chinese people, or we're only targeting children between the ages of 3 and 5. We're only targeting the top 1% of families, whatever our niche is. So those are our competitive strategies. So first we had, just to review, corporate strategies. So what's the difference between corporate and competitive? They're, both C words. Corporate, as I said, is when you have different departments or branches of a company, and in HR we need to figure out how do they relate to each other and communicate. That's corporate. So if you get up into corporate HR, that's where I said you're earning just as much money as a senior vice president. Corporate HR makes a ton of money. Because without good corporate HR, you have a company like Sony where all these departments can't really communicate with each other. Then there's competitive strategy, and that's where HR is involved in really understanding what's the overall strategy that the company has right now. Are they trying to lower costs? Are they trying to make the product or service unique? Or are they trying to target a focused market? And then finally, there's functional strategy. So that is for each department, okay, for each department, what basic thing, what function do they need to have to achieve our overall strategy, right? What do they need to do in a very practical, day-to-day, week-to-week way? Because they have managers who will tell their employees what to do, but if we don't know, then when the employees come to us and they're upset or they're stressed out or they're having trouble communicating with the manager, we don't know, right? We need to be involved in this so we can say, okay, look, I know what the overall strategy is in your department. Let me talk to the manager about this. If we don't know the overall strategy, then in HR we are at a huge disadvantage. Okay. So we have a little picture here of our corporate level strategy, right? That's, as I said, that's the top level, dealing with the departments and the branches. Then we have our competitive strategies, and that's for each different possible branch. How are we going to compete? And then we have our functional strategies. That's the lowest level. What are they going to do on a day-to-day basis to achieve the strategy? We had a quote here in the Dessler book from a Harvard production expert who said there's one conclusion, and the conclusion is everything is about communication, right? Equipment, computers, it's all secondary. The operational flexibility, which means the effectiveness or efficiency of, in this case, a plant, and the extent to which managers can cultivate people, can measure people, right? Evaluate people and communicate with them. That's what's really important. And that's what more and more businesses are understanding. You know, especially in this environment we're in now, where there are fewer and fewer jobs, which means the companies need the right people. Because how you cultivate and train people, how you measure or evaluate people, and how you communicate with people are so much more critical than any of the hardware that we have. So, human resource policies and practices, just to review, that's what we're talking about. The policies and the practices. Why? To produce the competencies, that means skills and behaviors that we want in order to achieve strategic goals or aims. That's the point of strategic HRM. We're trying to develop a good HR system so that we can get the kind of people who have the skills to accomplish the organization's goals. First, we need the goals, then we need the kind of people who can accomplish those goals, and then in HR, we get those kind of people. That's how we do that. So first, we decide what our strategic goals are, then we figure out what skills and behaviors are necessary. Now, look, I know that I'm repeating myself. I'm well aware of that. The reason is as we get into the next subject, so starting next subject, we get into these big 5 that we talked about. We'll talk first, recruitment, then selection, then training, then compensation, and then performance evaluation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And to really understand those, we really need to understand where HR fits in strategy. Because we're going to be talking a lot about developing skills and behaviors of people. How do we recruit people who have the right skills and behaviors? How do we select the people we want? How do we train them to increase specifically those skills and behaviors that we want? In a really well-run business, you know what skills and behaviors you want. How do you know? Because you know your strategic goals. If you don't know your strategic goals, you have no idea of what skills and behaviors you want. So in order to develop the right skills and behaviors, we need to know our goals. And then to develop these skills and behaviors, we need to create policies and practices. Okay? And again, I've said this a bunch of times. I'll say it again in our tutorial. And that means that when I put this on the test, I really expect you to be able to explain what I just said. Traditionally, as I said at the beginning of the class, top management would just do this on their own. They would figure out what is the strategy for the future. But the problem is then HR is in the dark. The CEO shows up and says, okay, guys, we have our strategy. So here's what we're trying to do. And then HR says, whoa, wait a minute. You didn't talk to us. We don't have those kind of people. It's going to take us months to get those kind of people. Or this is not a good market to do that. Or the customers are not happy enough to do that. Or the employees are not satisfied enough. Or in this market, our competition is already doing that. There's so much information that we have in HR. HR is a very big information collecting part of an organization. Now, to do this, to collect all this information in HR, we have some tools which help us with our strategy. So in general, we're going to talk about 3 tools that HR has. And over this semester, there'll be a presentation on this also. But there are 3 tools we need to know. One is called a strategy map. One is called an HR scorecard. And one is called a digital dashboard. And I need you to understand this semester that these are 3 of the most powerful and important tools that we use in HR. So we'll introduce them now. So what is a strategy map? Okay, it is on the computer and it is like a graph. It could be on paper, but usually these days it's on the computer. And what it does is it takes all the activities that a company like Sony does, everything that they do, and it creates this big map of all these things so that you could show this to an employee, pull down this chart in the old days, and the employee could see from the very bottom to the very top of the company, what are all the activities that get done to produce a Sony PlayStation or a Sony Xbox. Do they make both of those? That can't be right. Sony PlayStation, Sony Xbox. I have no idea. But whatever Sony makes, you know, what are all the activities they do, and what is their overall strategy? That's something in HR we need to be familiar with. What are all the activities? Next is the HR scorecard. Now, this is for each goal that we have. So if the goal is customer satisfaction or efficiency or productivity, or it could be a goal that we have for an individual person, we would have, and again, this is on the computer, it's this way of measuring and monitoring results quantitatively using numbers. And the digital dashboard, again, is on the computer. It is a picture of, and it says here, where the company's been and where it's going. But it's pretty much a microscope for everything in the strategy map. So there might be an activity that Sony does. For example, they advertise their, Xbox or PlayStation? Sony PlayStation, Sony Xbox. Which one sounds more reasonable? Sony PlayStation, Sony, I'll say PlayStation. So if they make the PlayStation and they advertise it, that's one activity. We could pull that up on the digital dashboard and see how have they done in the last 12 months, the last 6 months, the month to date, how's the employee satisfaction in that area, how's the customer satisfaction, how many units were returned, how much did they make, what's the expected profit for next year and revenue, and all of this information about each activity. So strategy map. It's a graph. It summarizes all the activities, the chain of activities. And of course, even on a computer, it would be very complicated to just look at this for a company like Sony. But it's all the activities, the chain of activities. The scorecard is quantitative. It gives financial and non-financial goals to these activities so that we can measure them. So for each activity that Sony does, how do we measure if it's going well or not? How's the advertising team doing? If the CEO comes to us in HR and says, how's the advertising team doing? We can't just say, oh, good. No, what's their score? And what does that score mean? And how is that score created? And the dashboard, which is the metrics, and that is how do we get all these numbers for each activity. So we could look at it this way, right? And you can look at this a little bit on your own because my face is covering it. But we have over here profitability. That's what we want, of course, right? And to have profitability, you need to make money. That's increased revenue. And we need to have lower cost. So you have lower cost, you make more revenue, you get a profit. Well, how do we make more revenue? Well, we get more customers, or we pay lower taxes, or we have different rights, or, these are all ways for us to make money. This would be an example of a very basic strategy map to try to start all the way down here. Let's see, what's the bottom? Can I read it? No, I can't. It's so small. To see whatever's the bottom, to get all the way to the top profitability for a company. Obviously, the larger the company, the more complicated the strategic map will be. The balanced scorecard, I said it's balanced, and that means it is both financial and non-financial, short-term and long-term, internal and external, okay? It's predictive. So what that means is we should be able in HR to look at this balanced scorecard and be able to predict what might some problems be in the future. Maybe we predict that there'll be turnover. We predict that the advertising department will spend too much money next quarter. We predict that our competition will introduce a new product. What do we expect to happen? It could be financial. We expect profits and we expect revenues and we expect a certain number of employees to leave. Or it's non-financial. We expect a certain level of efficiency, effectiveness, satisfaction. Those are not financial. Okay, the HR scorecard, it gives us this ability to look at a computer and see, as I said, all the activities, the employee behaviors, and strategic outcomes such as satisfaction or profitability. And what I'll do is throughout this semester, now I'm just telling you what they are. And then in the future, I'm going to give you some examples that I'll show you and we can look at them together. I think what we'll do in the tutorial is I'll try to actually load up a program so I can show something to you. The scorecard has metrics, which is all these numbers, and that's also the digital dashboard. And that includes, here's some examples. You don't need to know all these examples, but here's some examples of things we can measure. So we could measure revenue. We could measure salary increases. We could measure reimbursement for tuition and education. We could measure the HR to employee ratio. We could measure the cost that it costs to hire one person, or how long it takes to fill a position, or how many people quit each year, both voluntary, they choose to leave, and involuntary, they were fired. There's so much information that we can get from the business that in HR we can collect all of this, we put this on charts and graphs, and then we read them in this digital dashboard format. Last thing I'd like to talk about, last two things. One is the role of HR in mergers and acquisitions. So because of companies needing to cut costs and because of the removal of many antitrust laws, especially in America, more and more companies are buying smaller companies. Google is an amazing example of that. Really, Google created one thing, a search engine, and a not very good email system that they copied from Hotmail and called Gmail. So that's what Google had. But then they used their money to buy all of these other services and technologies and companies. Now, HR needs to be involved in this merger and acquisition process. Again, very big money in mergers and acquisitions. And the reason is, throughout the recent history, the history of the 21st century, only about 1/2 of mergers or acquisitions are even remotely successful. A lot of them are similar to what happened when Time Warner, which was a very big communications company, and they were very serious at Time Warner, big offices with wood and oak desks, and all the men wore suits and ties, and I think they bought America Online, which was a very young company where everybody was wearing t-shirts and shorts, and it didn't work. It completely lost money. It was a gigantic merger and acquisition failure. And the reason that these things usually fail is related to personnel. It's related to the people, that they can't communicate, they have problems with each other, they can't get along with each other, the employees are not happy, they're not satisfied, they're resisting, the employees are quitting, HR can't get in new people fast enough, morale goes down, productivity goes down. It's really all related to the people. And so especially in this day and age, when there's more and more mergers and acquisitions, HR takes a big role in this. So we're big involved in the planning stage to understand how many employees are going to be needed, how many will be fired, how many new employees will we need, what kind of benefits will they get, is it going to change their package, will this affect their pension, what are the legal issues in either letting employees go or bringing in new employees or two companies becoming one. HR needs to be involved in that. HR is also involved in due diligence. Due diligence is when a company investigates another company. Before buying the company, you have to investigate them, look at their financial records, their accounting books, check their policies and procedures, see if they have any pending law cases against them, just to make sure they are organized. Well, in terms of, as we said, we use computer systems in HR to understand every single activity in an organization. So HR is involved in this due diligence by checking, is this company that we're thinking about buying or merging with, is this company organized? Do they have a good organizational structure? How are their HR policies? How's their productivity? How's their efficiency? How's their effectiveness? How's their customer satisfaction? How's their employee satisfaction? We definitely want to know those things before we buy or merge with a new company. And then finally, the integration stage, when the two companies really do become one, or one company sort of eats the other company. At that point, we need a place for the employees to come if they have any sort of problem with their new manager or with communication or their new job responsibilities. And so HR is really closely involved with mergers and acquisitions. HR, the second thing I want to say is the idea of what does it mean to have a high performance system? In HR, our goal is to have a high performance system. And a high performance system really just means that HR is running at its best. You know, it's the Lamborghini of HRs, that it's really running effectively. And if we have a high performance system, and we're very, very good at what we do in HR, we can generate a great amount of profit for the company. HR is actually a profit center for an organization. So for one, we have all the data. And all of this data, all of the facts about our people, all of this analytical data that we have is so very valuable, not because we're going to sell it, but because, you know, for example, in the case of Best Buy wanted to improve their management, and they worked very, very closely with HR to identify the people who were most suited to become managers in the future. Looking at all of these characteristics and personality traits and skills and all of these abilities that people had, they were able to work closely with HR and find the right people, promote them, not just the person who'd been there the longest or the person who'd sold the most units, but the person who was right for the job. And it actually very much revitalized the company, because instead of their old system of just kind of promoting anybody who was sort of next in line, now they really promoted the people who were right for the job. Another way that HR helps a company to be profitable has to do with understanding how much money we should be investing into HR. How much money should we put into training? Where does this training budget come from? How do we measure if the training was effective? How do we forecast how many people we're going to need to hire? And how do we create value for the talent we do hire? How do we strengthen our supply chain? All the way from recruiting people to selecting them, to training them, to this whole process. If we can streamline that, we diminish a lot of waste. What we do is in HR, sometimes we'll do an audit. So an audit, if you work for an independent HR company, that might mean to go into a new company. Let's say you go into a company in China, and you're going to determine what kind of HR problems they have. So in your final exam, a lot of what I'm asking you to do is really like an HR audit. You're coming into this new company, you're going to have to determine what kind of problems they have. So this is a useful slide for you. So what kind of problems could a company have? Well, they might have problems with the roles in terms of job descriptions, which we'll talk about later, exempt versus non-exempt, and now you know what that means. But how many people do they have? Does everybody have a very clear job and a job description? Do they know who's exempt and non-exempt? Second is law, right? And that's why we did that already. Federal, state, local, employment-related law. Are they following the law? That's very important. Number three, how is their recruitment and selection, including the tools and the tests and the background checks and all of that? Is that effective or could that be improved? Next, compensation. How are their policies? How are their incentives? Could that be improved? Next is their employee relations, and that talks about unions and labor, discipline, and we'll talk about things like that and recognition later. Benefits, which is part of compensation. How is their Social Security, their unemployment insurance, their workers' compensation? Is all of that organized and efficient? Then also group benefits like insurance or time off. Are those organized and effective? Payroll, we're still talking about compensation, right? We have 1, 2, 3 different 4 things about compensation. Documentation, how is their record keeping? Do they keep very good records? Do the files have all kinds of information about resumes, applications, offers, job descriptions, performance evaluations, benefits forms? You know, a lot of companies are a little bit disorganized there. Their training, how is that working? How's their new employee orientation, and then how is their safety training, their career planning, all of their different kinds of their technical training. How is their communication? Do they have a good employee handbook? Do they have a newsletter? And then finally, termination, right? When they need to fire people, what kind of procedures are they using? Are they using exit interviews, things like that? So all of these are things that you can use in your final exam when you're analyzing a company. So when we talk about building this sort of high performance system, what we're talking about is really being able to use evidence to predict what's going to happen in the future, so that we have people who are able to be paid more and trained more, so that we have sophisticated recruitment and self-managed work teams. That's what we want. You know, we want a company that almost runs itself, where the teams function very efficiently, very effectively. We're able to train everybody. We're able to pay everybody more because we're all making more money. And if we're able to do that, and you can read this, you know, this is high performance versus low performance comparison in terms of percentages. For example, a low performance HR company, when they talk about who do they select, they might spend 4% of their time or money on deciding who to select. A high performance company, 30%. I mean, it's a huge difference. How much time do they spend recruiting the right person? A low performance company might spend, 8 hours, and a high performance company, 37 hours per employee. So we're talking about a huge, huge difference. Look at self-directed teams. A low performance company, 9% of their teams are self-directed. In a high performance company, 70%. These differences are absolutely night and day between what a high performance company can do versus a low performance company, and HR is so critical to making that happen. When we have high performance, what we get is employee engagement. We get this idea, and I talked about this in management, this level of commitment that goes very far beyond, okay, I'm going to get to work and I'm do my job and leave. These are people who are really committed, just like you're engaged to be married. These people are married to their job. So as HR, we want to be able to measure this. We want to be able to improve recruitment, selection, compensation, training, everything, so that the employees are much happier there, so that we have the right kind of people who want to be at this job, so that everybody gets trained more, gets paid more, and really feels engaged with this organization. Okay, so that's pretty much it. We're quite a bit shorter than some of the other slides, but that's good. Your homework is, I'm not going to ask you right now to create a LinkedIn profile. I think I'm going to save that. But just so you know, it is going to have to happen this semester. So if you want to do it now, one of the things I'm going to require you to do this semester is create a resume, and then create a LinkedIn profile. And I want to make sure your LinkedIn profile has all your information and your resume is uploaded. So since we didn't talk about that last tutorial, we can talk about that next tutorial. I won't make you do it right now, but if you want to get started, you will have to do it. Okay, so get ready for the next tutorial, and then when you're done with that, you can start on reading chapter 4. Okay, great. I will see you guys during the tutorial.